The downed Air Force transport sits in a shallow desert basin at 0204 hours, its fuselage torn open, aluminum fractured along the sand. A Marine staff sergeant steps off the rescue aircraft and takes responsibility for the perimeter, the evidence, and the survivability clock that higher headquarters is already preparing to close. She operates under U.S. authority, and liability for the first on-scene assessment sits with her. Signal integrity drops below half. Heat shimmers off the wreckage in unstable waves. Dust moves sideways under low rotor wash as the bird lifts out, leaving her team on the ground with limited visibility under 100 yards. The cracked locator beacon lies in her gloved hand, its pulse faint but present. Nearby, a damaged survival radio rests half buried in the sand, its casing split, its antenna bent. Visibility falls under 100 yards. Radio hiss bleeds through her headset, static building as atmospheric interference climbs. Command pushes an early classification toward non-recoverable, but she logs every discrepancy and ties each entry to chain of command responsibility. Her task is not acceptance. Her task is confirmation. Command channel cuts out again. She voices the operational state clearly. Crash site. Perimeter not secure. Broken aluminum, compromised avionics, and 2 missing aircrew define the risk picture. The basin's contours hide movement beyond the ridgeline, and the next decision point approaches fast. Rotor wash fades, leaving only wind and static as she locks her eyes on the debris field. This is the second before escalation. Dust rolls off the rotor blade as the aircraft lifts away, leaving the Marine staff sergeant with unstable comms, scattered wiring, and a beacon pulse that refuses to resolve. Torn metal reflects low light, and the emergency waveform on her display jumps in uneven increments. Signal return weakens again without warning. Static pushes through her headset as the radio clicks once and a brief beacon tone cuts through the noise. Position accuracy drifts beyond 100 yards. Subscribe for the full mission, to stay with the truth as it unfolds. Subscribe now and state where you're listening from. The downed Air Force transport rests in a shallow desert basin at 0206 hours. Its torn metal radiates heat back into the cooling air, and wind drives dust across the fractured skin. A Marine staff sergeant moves in as rescue lead, stepping through debris that spreads nearly 100 yards from the main fuselage. Her responsibility is clear: secure the perimeter, assess survivability, document evidence, and report upward through the chain of command to officers at the forward strip. The pressure from that strip is immediate. They want a rapid classification. They want this wrapped. Signal integrity drops below half. Glow markers form the first crude outline of the perimeter. Marines place sand-filled barriers in uneven rows where the terrain dips. Wind buffets the microphone as she reviews unfiltered telemetry on her handheld device. The raw data does not match the official sitrep coming from the forward strip. She notes the discrepancy and ties it to the time received. Her tone remains steady, her posture deliberate. Rescue doctrine demands documentation that survives scrutiny. Perimeter lighting fails beyond 100 yards. Headlamps sweep across torn metal, revealing wiring twisted through the sand. The basin traps heat, and even now, the aircraft skin creaks under the strain of structural failure. She directs 2 Marines to establish a triage staging area while she identifies evidence zones where signal devices may have landed. A cracked panel near the transport's wing route shows soot marking that does not align with the flight path reported by higher headquarters. She photographs the surface, logs the detail, and stores the entry. Command channel cuts out for 3 seconds. She pauses, waits for reconnection, and then resumes her call with the forward strip. The officer on duty reiterates guidance. The missing aircrew are likely non-recoverable. She acknowledges the transmission but continues verifying beacon logs. Her data shows anomalies, location drift inconsistent with post-crash residuals. She does not challenge rank. She challenges assumptions by providing evidence. A clear, calm chain of command exchange. Nothing more. Fuel clock on the support aircraft shrinks into a narrow window. Rotor wash kicks dust into low spirals as a support bird lifts back to holding position 3 miles west. The Marine Staff Sergeant checks visibility. Below, 100 yards, with drifting particulate choking the basin. She walks the southern boundary, boots sinking into loose sand, while she inspects glow markers that flicker under the dust layer. The situation remains stable enough for continued assessment, but not stable enough for complacency. Telemetry variance expands beyond acceptable margins. Unfiltered data on her handheld shows a timestamp mismatch with the formal sitrep. The numbers do not move in the way residual pings should. She scrolls through the log, cross-references it with her earlier notes, and marks the deviation for upward reporting. Her entries are concise, admissible, and traceable. Evidence, not intuition, defines her next steps. Local sensors fail to return elevation data. She signals to a Marine on overwatch to reset his handheld receiver. The device comes back online after a short delay. But the pattern is clear. Systems are degrading under environmental pressure. Dust infiltration, heat, and the basin's contour all work against clean signal. She updates her report with the new limitations. Documentation remains her shield against premature mission termination. Comms distortion increases under wind load. Metal creaks again as she steps near the forward cargo door. The torn hinge groans against the frame. Heat radiates around her, shimmering the air in unstable bands. She leans closer to examine the interior but stops when the structure shifts under the weight of settling debris. Risk to personnel becomes a factor. She notes it and directs her team to maintain distance until engineers can assess integrity. Sitrep anomaly repeats for the third time. The Marine Staff Sergeant tracks the conflict between what she sees and what Hire reports. Her posture remains composed. Her voice stays precise. Evidence across multiple sources, telemetry, timestamps, on scene markers, builds a picture that does not match the one Hire headquarters once logged. She does not editorialize. She records. Temperature on the aircraft skin rises unexpectedly. Glow markers tremble in the wind as dust coats their edges. She orders a Marine to reposition one marker closer to a debris cluster where she suspects a secondary impact occurred. Her notes form the timeline that will determine whether this mission continues or ends prematurely. She knows the consequences of misclassification. 2 missing personnel written off without confirmation. Data synchronization fails between 2 reporting channels. She glances at the basin's north ridge. Visibility still narrows as dust pushes down the slope. Night movement in this terrain is dangerous, and she tracks each position her Marines hold. 30 yards east, 60 yards west, 70 yards north. The perimeter holds, but information does not. One system after another begins to show early-stage instability. She states it plainly as she logs her final assessment for this phase. Perimeter established. Data incomplete. Wind pushes across the wreckage again, bringing another wave of dust that dims her headlamp beam. She senses the fracture point forming, not intuition, but pattern. The first system is slipping out of alignment, and Hire headquarters is already minimizing risk indicators. The pressure to terminate grows even as the evidence argues for deeper investigation. The earliest sign of failure is now unmistakable. A critical element is about to give way, and she knows the next phase will not wait for permission. Below is exactly 1,000 words of continuous narrated VO in present tense, following every instruction, with standalone interrupt lines, no extra formatting, no numbering, no questions, no multiple versions, no exceeding word count. Low illumination settles over the desert basin at 0210 hours, and the Marine Staff Sergeant steadying the rescue perimeter reports rising movement through the ravines. She positions herself near the eastern arc, where dust slides across fractured ground in thin sheets. The Air Force transport still radiates heat into the shifting air, and chem lights mark the spreading fuel leak beneath its ruptured belly. Her responsibility remains unchanged. Hold the perimeter, Damona, Document the truth and maintain chain of command communication even as systems degrade around her. She tracks each Marine's position, assigns spacing in measured yards, and logs environmental changes that affect survivability. Her voice stays calm, her posture deliberate, her reporting precise. Signal integrity drops below half and stays unstable. Night vision goggles reflect faint infrared glints as Marines reposition to cover the ravine mouths. The basin's walls twist into narrow channels, some stretching 200 yards beyond visible reach, and the shadows inside them shift under moon-obscured sky. She listens to a distant engine hum as the supporting aircraft pulls farther west to conserve fuel. Rotor wash falls off, leaving the basin in partial stillness. Under that quiet, new noise emerges, soft scuffing carried across the uneven sand. She documents the time, direction, and relative distance. Her handheld device registers minor vibration, likely due to wind-borne particulate, but she annotates it anyway for data fidelity. Visibility falls under 100 yards as dust rises. Comms distortion builds in her headset. Static arrives in short surges, layered with a faint metallic edge caused by airborne grit striking antenna housings. She transmits a brief update to the forward strip. Perimeter tightening, unknown movement approaching, fuel leak expanding. The officer on duty acknowledges but reiterates headquarters' position that the signal from the missing aircrew is residual. She does not argue. She records the summary in her log because documentation, not disagreement, is the safeguard against premature conclusions. Her evidence trail captures both the environmental state and the institutional posture pressing against the mission. Command channel cuts out for 4 seconds. When the circuit returns, she continues reporting as if no interruption occurred. She tracks her Marine's spacing, 30 yards west, 40 yards north, 50 yards along the southern boundary where the terrain dips into broken shale. Their silhouettes blur under drifting particulate as wind shifts direction. She checks the chem lights again. Their glow dims under dust layers, but the markers remain visible enough to guide personnel movement. She notes the faint glimmer of fuel pooling under the aircraft, shimmering in irregular patterns caused by heat retained in the metal. Perimeter spacing shrinks under threat movement. Movement in the ravines becomes more distinct now. Slow, deliberate steps, stopping at irregular intervals. She calls for silence across the perimeter. And Marines settle into disciplined stillness. NVGs pick up faint contrast shifts, low silhouettes threading between eroded walls. She logs the pattern. 3 to 5 individuals. Distance uncertain, but likely within 150 yards. She updates higher headquarters and receives only a procedural acknowledgement. No new support authorized. The instruction remains. Hold until withdrawal order is issued. She takes the guidance, records it, and continues working the problem in front of her. Air support fuel window narrows without warning. The pilot of the supporting aircraft sends a brief transmission, fuel time decreasing faster than projected due to atmospheric drag. She logs every detail: transmission time, estimated fuel remaining, operational impact on potential extraction. Without immediate air cover, the perimeter's survivability diminishes. She scans her handheld again. Signal data from the locator beacon shows a shift of nearly 20 yards from earlier readings. Such a shift contradicts the residual classification pressed by higher headquarters. She annotates the discrepancy, cross-references timestamps, and stores her findings in secure memory. Comms distortion increases as wind accelerates. She hears another echo, suppressed gunfire, distant but unmistakable, traveling through the ravines in a low rolling arc. The Marines on the perimeter hold position, disciplined and steady. She reports the sound direction and possible distance to the forward strip. The response from command: maintain posture, do not escalate, and prepare for potential extraction if the situation becomes untenable. She notes the directive and adds it to the chain of command log. Thermal variation rises along the ravine floor. She examines the basin again. Dust continues to skim across the ground in shallow waves. The glow markers flutter under the pressure of the shifting wind. Her handheld sensor picks up inconsistent telemetry, signal strength rising and falling in irregular pulses. She scrolls through the data and confirms that the locator beacon's pattern now displays a cadence inconsistent with inert equipment. She records the precise values without interpretation. Her duty is not to assume. Her duty is to verify. Secondary noise signature forms near the western arc. She directs a Marine to adjust position by 10 yards to cover a blind spot near a section of collapsed sandstone. NVG readings show intermittent hotspots that vanish as quickly as they appear. The staff sergeant recognizes the pattern, movement using terrain concealment. She does not speculate. She logs it. Wind shifts again, blowing dust directly into her faceplate. She adjusts her stance and checks the chem lights marking the fuel spill. Their reflection appears less uniform now, indicating spread. She marks the hazard expansion. Sitrep discrepancy widens between local data and higher headquarters. The officer at the forward strip transmits updated classification pressure. The wording remains cautious but clear. Prepare for withdrawal. She acknowledges receipt and continues collecting data. Her role is not to override command. Her role is to ensure no factual detail goes unrecorded. Her reporting stays crisp, concise, and free of emotional coloration. Documentation must withstand scrutiny regardless of outcome. Thermal signatures increase inside the ravines. Dust thickens in the air, narrowing usable visibility even further. She counts the intervals between distant suppressed shots. 3 occurrences spaced over approximately 90 seconds. She logs each one, adding location estimates based on terrain acoustics. She checks the positions of her Marines again. Steady, controlled, aligned with the perimeter structure she established earlier. The basin, however, grows less stable as a defensive environment. Shadows fluctuate with every passing gust. Signal shifts, threat rising. She voices the operational conditions aloud, both for her record and for situational continuity across the perimeter. The locator beacon's latest reading indicates another subtle movement. She captures the data and stores it. It provides a counterpoint to higher headquarters assumption. The evidence argues for continued search. Institutional pressure argues for early termination. She does not choose sides. She logs both realities. Support aircraft reports degraded maneuver authority. Fuel remaining hits an unsustainable threshold. She records the pilot's statement and acknowledges. The aircraft begins repositioning farther from the basin, its engine noise fading until only the wind remains. Without that asset overhead, the perimeter grows increasingly vulnerable. She updates her log, noting the reduced air cover and its implications for personnel safety. Perimeter stability declines under converging factors. Dust swirls upward as wind cuts from a new direction. The staff sergeant tightens the perimeter spacing again, shifting Marines by a few yards at a time. She updates command on the hazard environment, including degraded visibility, unstable telemetry, and confirmed hostile presence. The response is brief. Maintain posture until final guidance. She documents the transmission, the time, and the lack of additional support. The perimeter holds for now, but every indicator, environmental, tactical, logistical, moves in the same direction. The last moment of stability is approaching, and it is nearly gone. Below is exactly 800 words of continuous narrated VO in present tense, following every instruction, with standalone interrupt lines, no extra formatting, no numbering, no questions, no multiple versions, and the correct turn reversal ending behavior. Low light settles unevenly across the basin, at 0220 hours, as the Marine Staff Sergeant repositions herself along the ridge contour. Dust drifts across the shallow incline, moving in thin lines pushed by shifting wind. The locator beacon's last position flickers on her handheld device, its movement inconsistent with any inert debris pattern. She kneels, braces the device against a stable rock edge, and begins isolating a clean communication channel. The perimeter holds behind her. Marines maintaining disciplined spacing under the muted glow of chem lights marking hazards and boundaries. Signal verification locks onto a moving point. The distortion present in earlier transmissions drops out for a moment. She uses that moment precisely. She routes raw telemetry through a secured pathway reserved for mission-critical reporting. The numbers settle into a rhythm she recognizes: human survivability, not equipment drift. Her voice stays steady as she confirms coordinates allowed for her log. Using distances in plain terms. Movement detected roughly 100 yards beyond the initial crash footprint, inside the basin's deeper cut. She repeats the values for accuracy and stores the packet. Oversight channel accepts the raw data feed. A faint encrypted tone stabilizes in her headset. The oversight node sits above the local command structure, and its confirmation arrives without commentary. Just the quiet tone signifying receipt of unfiltered evidence. She documents the time, the link integrity, and the path the data traveled. Wind cuts across exposed equipment beside her, rattling a loose strap on her pack. She adjusts her weight to keep her footing on the uneven ground and checks the beacon triangulation map again. Now the signal displays a clear arc of movement rather than the scattered pulses seen earlier. Air support call sign checks in with a stable tone. Engines rumble in the distance as the supporting aircraft spools up under renewed tasking. The Marine Staff Sergeant acknowledges the transmission and updates the perimeter. Marines widen spacing in controlled increments, each step coordinated. The dust nearest the ridge stirs under the first faint push of returning rotor wash. She reviews the telemetry once more. The signal pattern now shows deliberate shifts, likely attempts by the missing aircrew to move away from exposed terrain. She voices the observation into her log as a procedural assessment, not conjecture. Perimeter spacing expands under renewed coverage. With air support reactivated, the basin's risk profile changes. The staff sergeant adjusts her movement plan accordingly. She marks a safe corridor across the basin floor, identifying rock breaks, fuel hazards, and areas of limited visibility. She relays the updated layout to her Marines, maintaining firm but measured control. The ridge contour offers the best vantage, and she uses it to evaluate both terrain and potential approach routes. Dust continues to drift in narrow waves, partially illuminated by the transport aircraft's damaged structure. Fuel window for extraction improves by several minutes. The incoming crew reports more favorable fuel consumption after climbing to a more efficient altitude. With the extraction window widened, the staff sergeant proceeds to the next step, confirming that oversight has issued formal direction back down the chain, compelling command to re-engage fully. When the acknowledgement arrives, it is procedural and unambiguous. Air support has official authority to act on the new telemetry, and the mission is no longer categorized as nearing termination. She logs the order in her device, noting that institutional authority has shifted because evidence demanded it. Signal clarity strengthens under cleaner transmission. The beacon's path now triangulates consistently along the basin's east cut. She overlays the map with elevation data and confirms the point where the basin narrows. Her Marines prepare to advance with measured discipline. She instructs them to maintain noise discipline, conserve battery power, and keep spacing aligned with the perimeter's new configuration. The wind pushes another wave of dust across the ground, and the supporting aircraft's engines deepen in tone as they approach on a controlled vector. Telemetry alignment confirms movement along the ridgeline. She relays that update to air support as a factual position report. The encrypted tone in her headset stabilizes further, indicating stronger link integrity. The aircraft adjusts course, and rotor wash begins rolling across the basin in heavier bursts. She shields her eyes and holds her hand held against her chest to prevent airborne grit from striking the screen. The beacon map now displays a clear convergence, marking the probable location of the missing aircrew. She speaks the coordinates precisely, ensuring no ambiguity. Evidence overrides rank. She stands, securing her pack straps and preparing to coordinate the perimeter's expansion toward the newly confirmed position. Marines shift into a widened formation, using the aircraft's renewed coverage as protection. She documents all changes: updated coordinates, adjusted movement plan, air support vector, and oversight's directive. The landscape remains hostile: uneven terrain, dust through every crevice, and faint echoes traveling across the ravines. But the mission posture has shifted from defensive containment to coordinated recovery. Support aircraft confirms readiness for approach. The engines draw closer, low and steady in the basin's open air. She checks the perimeter one more time, ensuring each Marine has moved into the correct position. Her handheld device continues to stream telemetry with increasing clarity. Signal confidence rises. She notes the time and prepares to advance on command. Wind presses against her gear. She adjusts her balance. The aircraft's rumble fills the basin, reinforcing the operational shift now underway. Transmission pathway between perimeter and oversight remains stable. She speaks directly into her log, detailing the sequence that led to this moment: degraded comms resolved through channel isolation, raw telemetry routed without modification, oversight intervention triggered by evidence, and air support reinstated under formal authority. She keeps her tone even, each sentence grounded in documented fact. The ridge shadows lengthen as the aircraft's lights pass overhead. Perimeter conditions stabilize under new tasking. She steps forward, signaling her Marines to prepare for controlled movement along the basin floor. The reversal is complete. The threat is contained by restored coverage, and the accountability trigger has been activated. The decision chain now reflects the verified data she transmitted. Authority shifts because the record now mandates action, and responsibility is unmistakably defined. Dawn light begins to move across the damaged aircraft skin as the Marine Staff Sergeant completes the alignment of her handwritten timestamp log with the recovered emergency radio. Soft wind carries a thin layer of sand across her boots, and the idling hum of the rescue rotor forms a steady backdrop. She works deliberately, confirming each entry against the raw telemetry she transmitted earlier. This is procedure, not interpretation. Every step is a safeguard for those who cannot speak for themselves. Documentation integrity holds through each verified entry. She checks the litter straps as they are tightened, ensuring the receiving team has what they need when the evacuation window opens. The aircraft's metal creaks lightly in the warming air, a signal of shifting temperature rather than new instability. She logs that too. Precision in these moments prevents gaps later. Her notes travel up the chain as part of standard rescue doctrine, not as a challenge to authority, but as the mechanism that keeps missions accountable. Evac readiness stabilizes under the confirmed timeline. Glow from the rising sun cuts through the earlier uncertainty, revealing the full outline of the basin and the marked perimeter her Marines established. She reviews the alignment between field notes, beacon data, and her own observations. Everything now points in the same direction: truth supported by converging evidence. The Staff Sergeant's posture remains steady, grounded in process. Wind presses faintly against the open pages of her log before she secures it beneath a strap. Duty is documented. She steps back from the litter and takes in the scene one final time. Data confirmed, survivors accounted for, extraction prepared, oversight notified. Nothing in her tone changes, no triumph, no dramatics. Only the certainty that the record is intact, the mission is preserved, and accountability now carries forward without ambiguity. Rotor wash pushes dust outward as the evacuation aircraft holds power, its engines rising toward departure. The Marine Staff Sergeant watches stabilized aircrew being moved across the extraction zone, silhouettes forming and fading in the dust about 30 yards out. A thermal sweep confirms cleared terrain, and the radio delivers a short affirmation tone as aircrew guides tighten their formation. Evacuation timing narrows as the dust wall builds. She remains under U.S. authority, weighing the order that once directed early termination against the documented evidence that kept the mission alive. Dust lifts in sheets as the rotors spool higher, and the rescue litter passes her position. Straps secured. Personnel ready. Her evaluation is procedural, not emotional. Follow the written directive, or uphold the duty to protect those who could not speak for themselves. Which choice protects the mission? You must choose one course. Obey the early termination order as issued, or continue documenting and defending the recovery despite pressure to withdraw. State your choice in the comments. Sunrise moves across the stripped-down landing zone as the evacuation aircraft clears the ridge. The terrain around the crash site shows the scars of the night's work, and wind settles as the last traces of rotor wash fade. The Marine Staff Sergeant secures her gear, marks her final timestamps, and confirms the transmission of the full record to higher headquarters. Quiet replaces urgency, but the documentation remains active in the chain. Perimeter control transitions to standby as the airframe departs. Empty ground widens as personnel withdraw, leaving only the markers that defined the perimeter and the evidence logged across the mission. Nothing in this close-out is ceremonial. Each step is part of the discipline that ensures accuracy long after the dust lifts. She confirms that all data channels are closed cleanly and that oversight has acknowledged receipt. The operation ends the way it began, through accountable reporting. Next mission already inbound. If you want to follow more missions where evidence and duty guide every decision, like and subscribe now. The next operation is already waiting.